Everyone, and good morning. Welcome to Gallop Solutions webinar today on compelling benefits of specialist QA staffing versus IT staffing. My name is Matthew Shapiro, and I'm Vice President of Sales and Operations here at Gallop Solutions. I'd like to take a few moments and introduce Gallop more formally. Gallop Solutions is a US-based co-located IT software testing services and specialist QA and staffing services company with offices in Pennsylvania and California. Gallop services are generally backed by our proprietary IP and in-house R&D teams. We're a 100% owned subsidiary of Signity Technologies, which is currently the third largest independent software testing services company. Leading organizations across the world have relied on Gallop software testing services for more than a decade and have achieved significant market acceleration, returns on investments in their software quality initiatives. Gallop constantly innovates and invests in R&D around software testing and contributes immensely to the software testing community by thought leadership, blogs, white papers, and webinars. This webinar this morning is the 9th one in the Gallop webinar series. Our earlier webinars were on diverse areas of software testing. Let me take a few moments and introduce our speakers for today's webinar. First of all, we have Andrew Broswell, is a senior research analyst and staff at Staffing Industry Analyst, SIA, covering the IT segment of temporary staffing, along with merger and acquisition activity related to the Affordable Care Act. Prior to Staffing Industry Analysts, spent more than 8 years in equity investment research and was director of research for a boutique investment banking and advisory firm. Andrew has been a featured speaker for many conferences, presentations, media interviews, including CNBC's Squawk Box. Greg Longacre is the National Sales Manager and responsible for Gallup's core staffing business. Greg has over 17 years of staffing industry experience as he's worked in a variety of staffing disciplines, ranging from healthcare through engineering, and for the better part of his career in IT. Greg spent 12 years with Yo Company with increasing responsibility up to area director. So without further delay, I'd like to pass this webinar over to Andrew, who will briefly go over the agenda and the rest of the presentation before passing to Gallop. Andrew?
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you very much to Gallop for inviting me to present some of our research. I'll start with telling you just a bit about our firm. We've been around for more than 25 years, and we work both with staffing firms, of which we count 40 of the largest 50 in the U.S. among our client base, as well as large buyers of contingent work, with more than 70 companies comprising over $100 billion in annual contingent spend on our CWS Council. On the next slide, we'll see a selection of a few of our clients in each of those two categories, staffing suppliers as well as the Contingent Workforce Council, as well as a third group, which we call Workforce Solutions Providers. And in that middle category, we have things such as managed service program providers, job boards, other technology providers, vendor management systems, which are the software tools that either a company or a managed service provider will use to manage its group of staffing suppliers. Now, moving into some of the research on the next slide, before I start throwing numbers at you, a bit of context for those. So in this rather non-colorful graphic here, we have outside the gray circle this sort of the larger workforce solutions ecosystem, and that has some of those technologies that I was discussing before, as well as things like IC compliance, outplacement services, recruitment process outsourcing. So that's the larger workforce solutions ecosystem that some of our research touches on. But if we go to the next slide, we'll sort of see the core, which is just how we define the staffing industry, which is just temporary staffing and place in search. So this is the core of our research historically, our coverage focus historically for staffing industry analysts. And these market estimates that I will discuss on the next slide, this is what we're talking about, just temporary staffing, just place in search. For example, if we talk about managed services under statement of work, that market is a multiple of the total, roughly 4 to 5 times the total scale of just the temporary staffing industry that we're looking at here. And we know that Gallop and some other more forward-thinking firms are doing more of that kind of business as well. So this is our market estimate, both historical in the gold bars and the projections for this year and next in terms of the U.S. IT staffing market size. As we see here, in 2012, the industry broke through the previous high water mark that was set in 2000. And we think this year and next will be the 4th and 5th consecutive years of new highs for the market. On the next slide, we'll see the same time period, but rather than looking at a bar chart of market size, here we're looking at a line chart of annual year-over-year growth. So the first takeaway is we see these really large swings from expansion and contraction. This just really drives home what a hyper-cyclical industry staffing tends to be. The corrections and recoveries becoming far more abrupt and more severe than we see in the underlying industry themselves. Second is the tapering growth that we see. Again, these blue bars are projections for this year and next, and so this will be 3 straight years of 6% growth, decelerating somewhat from the double-digit growth that we saw coming out of the recovery from the Great Recession. Now, 6% still a multiple of GDP, still healthy growth, but perhaps not as rapid as one might expect with all the tailwinds driving demand for technology. Moving to the next slide, we'll look at one of the major drivers of our industry forecast, and that's GDP. Now, when we're looking at our forecast and projecting market growth from year to year, we look at a multitude of indicators. We have a number of proprietary industry surveys, benchmarking surveys that we conduct, which get a good amount of the industry in terms of visibility there. We look at BLS data trends, results, and commentary from the publicly traded firms, a number of things that are good forward indicators. However, when we look backwards, the highest corollary to changes in the temporary staffing market size are changes in GDP. So here we have in the left-hand table the GDP forecasts upon which we based our most recent forecast update. Those for 2.4% growth this year, 2.6% next year. Those of you who have been paying attention notice those GDP projections have been ratcheting down pretty steadily throughout the year. In the right hand, we have a scatter plot, which with each dot representing 1 year in the IT staffing market back to 1998. 2 red dots are projections for this year and next. Now, when we plot the R-squared statistic, so looking at the regression and plotting the R-squared, we get a value of 0.5, which tells us that about half of the historical changes in the IT staffing market have been driven by changes in GDP. So this is a significant correlation. This is actually far lower than the correlation of the overall staffing industry, which shows 0.76, meaning more than 3/4 of the change is driven by GDP. And one reason for that, that lower corollary in IT staffing, we'll see on the next slide, which is really the outsized secular growth that we have seen and continue to see in tech employment. So here we have from 2000 up through last year, most recent data that we have, and we see that IT employment represented by the gold line has increased more than 30% versus just 5.3% for total non-farm employment represented by the blue line. When we look at the left-hand side of this of the line, sorry, thank you. We see that the line for IT employment, the gold line, immediately goes negative in the first few years of this, and that makes sense. So that's the fallout sort of from the dot-com bubble, and we know that that was a tech-led recession in the U.S. So it makes sense that IT employment suffered more than total non-farm employment. If we move along to 2008, 2009, we see that the blue line for total non-farm employment actually dipped to a much greater degree. So it tells us the Great Recession was relatively mild. You see that slope of the gold line just barely sort of goes negative there between 2008 and 2010 before the recovery. So we'll go on to the next slide and look at a couple of the drivers of this secular employment growth in technology. And these are trends that you're no doubt aware of, but nonetheless it helps to sort of see the magnitude. On the left, we have an index of final sales of computers, and to be specific, that includes PCs and tablet devices. It does not include smartphone handsets. The growth there would be actually much more extreme than we see here. So this is an indexed value, indexed to 100 in the year 2009. We see that the only year where there's an annual decline in sales is in 2010, when the U.S. economy was in the grips of the Great Recession. The chart on the right shows global internet users, which has nearly tripled over the past 10 years from 2005 through the end of last year. On the next slide, we will see what is sort of an inverse corollary to that rising employment, which is falling unemployment. So this data comes from BLS, and this is actually data that they don't publish, but they share with us. So this is unemployment on an occupational level, and we get these values quarterly. They are fairly volatile because of a smaller sample size than you'll get with most of the data that BLS does publish. So we smooth it somewhat by taking a trailing four-quarter median. So what we see here in the first column is the median unemployment rate for the 4 quarters through the middle of last year, and then the column next to it, the median for the 4 quarters through the middle of this year, so the most recent 4-quarter period, and then the year-over-year change. In the final column, we have the total employment in each occupation, which is how the chart is sorted. The top is the overall occupational group for IT, and then we have some specific occupations. So just looking at the bold line on top, we see a year-over-year change of 0.9 of a percentage point in a decrease in the unemployment rate, which nominally less than 1% might not sound like much, but when you're moving from 3.3% to 2.4%, it's a very significant move, and it's certainly created some difficulties in sourcing and recruiting for staffing suppliers. Now, with skilled labor markets this tight, where will our supply come from? Well, on the next slide, we'll look at one source, albeit certainly a source of not extremely experienced supply, but nonetheless some encouraging trends here. So we're looking at computer science degrees awarded in the U.S., and I think we've all heard quite a bit about the trend in STEM education. So there's some relatively encouraging signs relative to what we might hear in the media. Degrees for each had bottomed between 2008 and 2009 and have been increasing each subsequent year. Awards for master's degrees, in fact, are now at an all-time high. On the next slide, we'll look at one other source of supply, and this one is certainly controversial with domestic technology workers in the U.S., but putting those issues with the H-1B worker visa program aside, and just sort of looking at this as a measure of both building demand and a supply constraint. So as you might know, H-1Bs are limited to 85,000 per year, 20,000 of which are reserved for advanced degree holders. And when there are more petitions than they have to allocate, there is a lottery. So we had that condition for the last 3 fiscal year filing periods. And this is the number of petitions filed each. So you see we had 35% year-on-year growth in petitions filed this year, which is on top of 39% the prior year. And every sign indicates that those are going to continue piling up. Prior to 2014 fiscal year filing period, there hadn't been a lottery since fiscal 2008. So there's a full 6 years in there where they never hit the cap till later in the year. So now we've identified a number of positive trends for the IT staffing market. On the next slide, we'll look at one potentially troubling development. So what we see here is median gross margin among publicly traded U.S. staffing firms. This group is not specific to IT. We don't have enough IT pure plays to give us a good sample size. So this is the whole industry. But what we see here, again, this is gross margin. So this is sort of generally representative of what how you might view bill pay spreads and changes in that markup. So if we look at the left, clearly, the industry was still partying like it was 1999 with 30+% gross margins, which after the bursting of the tech bubble precipitously fell. We see them bottoming in the mid 25% range, 2004, 2005. The industry started to recover. Economy was strengthening. In 2006, 2007, we see some gross margin expansion up to above 27%. Then another economic contraction drove margins back down to below 25.5%, where they had bottomed in the fallout from the dot-com bubble. And what we've seen here over the last 4 years inside this red box, even as the market has continued to grow, gross margins have been really stuck in this low 25% range, not recovering, not showing pricing power that you expect in such a high demand and supply constrained environment. So what's going on here? Well, on the next slide, we will see a pretty clear corollary, and that is penetration of vendor management systems among large buyers of contingent work. And again, this is vendor management system. This is software tools that either companies or their managed service providers will use to manage their staffing suppliers. And so we see here for the gold bar is the percent of buyers using VMS. So this is penetration as part in terms of the number of buyers as opposed to the amount of spend. So what we see is just over this 10-year period, from 2005 to 2014, we have from below 40% to greater than 80% of the buyers that were using a VMS. What we know is the consequence of VMS is definitely an increase in competition on a pure price basis. It sort of removes the touch point from the supplier to the client and leads to some commoditization of the product. On the next slide, we will see that in terms of spend in North America, more than half of the staffing spend flows through a VMS. And we know that, that the penetration in the IT staffing market is particularly high. So again, the consequence of this is less client interaction, more price competition, and some commoditization of labor. Now this has inspired some suppliers, which we'll see on the next slide, to move their services up the value chain. So rather than being suppliers of strictly of staff augmentation services, looking more towards higher value services. And one of the aims here is to demonstrate the value of the client and be able to generate better margins. So in this table, we see the top, we have 6 publicly traded companies in what we call the IT solutions space. You would call it consulting or outsourcing. And on the bottom, 6 of the publicly traded IT staffing companies. These are about as close to pure play as we can get. But what we see over the last 3 full years is pretty consistently 15 percentage points higher in gross margin for the solutions companies versus the staffing companies. Now, the transition from a staff hog supplier to becoming a fully fledged solutions provider is certainly not easy. It requires a much more robust delivery platform, more sophisticated subject matter expertise on your team, and often depends on intellectual property developed around specific tools or methodologies for completing projects or providing services. A big key in this transition is often specialization, a firm finding a niche and focusing its efforts to become a preferred solution provider in that space. And I think that's a strategy that we see Gallop has employed to good effect in the software QA testing space. On the next slide, we'll see something notable. We don't often find areas where the group of staffing suppliers and their clients on the next slide are in such close agreement. So we'll move forward. Yes, so here we go. This is from our last year's contingent buyer survey, where we survey large companies that utilize large volumes of contingent labor. And among all these different types of work that we track, statement of work and project-based workers had the largest intended increase in utilization. So when we asked, which of these types of work do you intend to use more or intend to use fewer of, statement of work generated the most positive response. So why would that be? And we know that that the suppliers can generate some more margin. But what we really are hearing from the buyers here is that they're interested in shifting some measure of business risk outside their own organization to the supplier, making it a real partnership in that way, and that both firms are leveraged to success in terms of the business outcome. And this allows the client to pay for a business outcome, a specific deliverable, a specific milestone, rather than simply a quantity of labor with the outcome more in question. Now, again, this has historically sort of been a statement of work business that was more the focus of the consulting and outsourcing firms. But what we see here is the engagement with staffing suppliers, or companies that have historically been more in staffing, is sort of related to counter trends of insourcing and onshoring, where a lot of these companies want a partner that's a bit closer at hand than what they might get from an offshore solutions provider. There's more control than a full outsourcing on the part of the client for them to sort of direct the course of the performance of the work, the project, or the service, but still allows them to shift some of that business outcome risk. Now, on the next slide, we'll look quickly at one of the other major workforce trends that we're observing, the impact of automation. This is something that you may have heard quite a bit about. Okay, I wasn't anticipating the animation on this slide. We might have to click it 3 times to get each of these 3 boxes up. So here's just a couple of survey data points. Pew Research study asking, will AI and robotics displace more jobs than they create by 2025? We see the answers were pretty well split, yes or no there. What we looked at is a study from 2 researchers from Oxford University, Fry and Osborne, and what they found was that 47% of all U.S. jobs were at high risk of automation over the next 10 to 20 years. And we actually took their study and we overlaid it on the landscape of the U.S. temporary workforce, and found, not surprisingly, that that temporary work was at a much higher degree, 72% of all U.S. temp jobs, which sort of makes sense. Temp jobs are almost by definition non-core, and the sorts of work that can be done by someone with perhaps relatively little institutional knowledge. On the next page, we'll look at some of the specific metrics that we developed around this research out of Oxford University. And we look at the average probability of automation, again, 72% for total temporary staffing. For professional temporary staffing, less than half of that, just about 33%. And IT temporary staffing was lower, yet again, than professional as a whole. We see two specific occupations: computer support specialists and computer programmers, both at relatively high among the occupations. The good thing, software developers, both systems and applications-based software, are quite low, and we would obviously software testing is within the development cycle. So among the BLS occupational groups, software developers are sort of the closest that we could get to the software testing space. So it makes sense that software developers will be a very low risk because it'll be algorithms that drive much of this automation. So you folks will be one of the few that potentially benefits from a trend that that might effectively reduce demand for skills across much of the rest of the economy. So in my last two slides, we'll spend just a minute peering through the long lens. This table shows long-term IT employment projections. This comes from some BLS data. They update every 5 years. This looks through 2022. And total jobs growth over that period is projected at 10.8% and 18% for computer and mathematical occupations, so considerably higher, again, than the rest of the economy. And we look at a number of those occupations are well over 20% projected growth, some of the highest projected growth anywhere in the economy. And finally, on my last slide, we'll take that earlier market size slide that we had, and based on these BLS projections, just take a straight line forward to 2022, and we see that growth advantage, that employment growth advantage for technology, it's projected to really continue. Over 53% growth from 2000 for IT employment versus less than 22%, and a compound annual growth rate more than double for technology versus overall economy. So if there's one takeaway here, that IT is a good place to be. That's all the time I have today. Thank you, and I'm going to hand it back to Greg.
Thank you, Andrew. That was a wealth of information, a lot of data for us to be able to pore over and look at over time here as well. I think it was a great segue into what we're going to be talking about in terms of specialty QA staffing and niche markets. We see this as being a huge market, and looking at some Gartner information on this slide, we're looking at applications and testing services. We're looking at application development and maintenance in over a $200 billion industry, which is obviously monstrous. It's great to hear. It's great to hear that this is a growing industry. But when we take a slice of that and look at purely in the testing space, we're looking at still $60 billion that we're playing in the QA testing space, which is an amazing number. Clearly something that we think is going to continue to grow. And if you look down this slide, in terms of growth, you're seeing career tester growth grown by over 25,000 per year in the last 5 years, and we're expecting that to continue for the next 3 years. So clearly, this space is a space that is growing. Customers recognize that, companies recognize that, and so do people that are looking to work in the QA space, in the staffing industry, as well as in the IT industry. The high number of career testers is now growing towards over 250,000 globally. So when we look at something that, for many companies, testing was an afterthought years ago, it's clearly not an afterthought now, and it's becoming one of the priorities for these companies if that type of number continues to grow. Next slide for me. Here, what we're trying to point out, we're talking about the specialized testing services as a growth industry. And if you look down through some of the numbers and where we have our highlights here, we're looking at over a $15.7 billion industry in 2014, growing at over 12% in 2014, and continuing that through 2014 through 2019. So we see this as continuing to grow just in this STS space. If you look at the overall IT industry, what we're seeing using Nielsen Hall's data is a 2% growth of the overall IT industry, but in testing services plus 12%. Now, if you jive that with what Andrew was talking about a little bit earlier in their numbers, as seeing a 6% growth in IT services, we're still specifically in the QA space doubling that growth. So that number still, even at 6%, the specific testing services is growing at almost double that rate. So we're still seeing tremendous growth here. As this slide will show, what we're looking at is we're on the left-hand side, we're looking at some of what we would call the big boys in the software industry, in managed service industries, the Accentures, the Cognizants. You're seeing their revenue in terms of billions, massive organizations, and that's wonderful. That's great. I'm glad to see they're thriving so well. But what we look at is, as a specialist, and getting back to how we differentiate ourselves and getting back to some of what Andrew was talking about, how are we going to not only separate ourselves but thrive and grow, is by being specifically in this QA space. And if you look at the independent testing services that are out there on the right-hand side, you'll see that as part of Signity, we're the third largest player in this space. There are several in this space, but we're the third largest player, and our estimated growth is pretty significant between 2013 and 2014. So what does a customer look for in a specialized QA staffing partner? Why would they do that? What are they going to be reaching for? What have they not achieved? What's the differentiator? There's a lot of companies that do IT staffing out there. But what is going to be different? Well, one of the things that you're going to first look for, obviously, as a manager or a director or VP in this space is, does the company have the technical expertise? Do they understand the QA world? Do they understand what I need? Do they understand the technologies that are out there and what I'm going to be trying to employ or what I think I want to employ? That's number one. The second piece to this is the domain expertise. If I'm in healthcare, does the company or the partners that I currently have in that space, do they specialize in this? Do they have that expertise? Or am I playing with somebody that's more of a generalist? Are they going to be able to leverage the same things that somebody else might be able to? That's a question that needs to be answered for a lot of companies. Reach is another one. Locations around the country, but these days it's locations around the globe, really. It's companies are no longer regional or national, they're global in scale. Can those companies reach me wherever I need them to be, wherever I want to grow a team, wherever something needs to happen? Can they get there for me? What's going to be the capability of that company? And then vehicles for support. What offerings can a company give me? Are they purely a managed services company? Do they have staffing capabilities if I need one-off resources? Can they provide co-location? If I want to get an offshoring project going, can they do that for me? What are they going to be able to do? Or are the companies that I have, are they a single note? Do they have one thing that they can offer me and that's all they can do in terms of this? And where can you get me tomorrow? This might actually be the most important thing on this slide. In terms of, I know where I am today. My business knows where it is today. But where am I going to be tomorrow? Can I choose a partner that's going to guide me and get me to that next level, not just provide me with a body, not just provide me with a time and materials resource? Can they get me where I'm going and where I'm going to need to be before I even know I need to be there? Those are the types of things that thought leaders can do. Those are the types of things that generalist staffing firms, whether it be IT or otherwise, can't do. So these are the things that if somebody's looking for a QA partner, what are they going to be able to do for them? And then obviously it wouldn't be a business if somebody didn't bring up pricing. You want to make sure that it's priced right. The company wants to make sure that they are getting the maximum quote unquote bang for their buck. We saw some of those slides from Andrew in terms of margins and where they stand right now. So clearly, while people value talent, while people value what is happening in the industry, they also realize that in order to be able to reach their goals, they not only need to have that high-level talent, but they also need to meet their goals in terms of their budgets. So these are some of the success stories that we've had. I can go through them individually, but you're there, you can read them as well. I think these are really impactful stories, and these are just samples of some of the things that we've been able to achieve. And I'm sure there are others that are out there that have similar stories, but these are some of the things that we're proud of and that we've been able to achieve with in the first story, a 30% reduction in project budget. That's something that people want to know about, people want to be with. For HP, which we have an excellent relationship with, Gallup's provided expert teams that deliver over 30 plus engagements across various verticals. It's not easy to do, and it's certainly not easy to please HP all the time, but we've done that, and we've done it successfully on multiple engagements, so we're very proud of that. And then for an IT consulting services provider, Gallup's testing experts with a variety of people working closely with them resulted in application scalability and brought about multiple fold improvement in response time for them, which we know they're very happy with. So these are some of the things that, as a company that moves forward, that's working to be cutting edge each and every day, these are the types of things that can be achieved in that specialty space. Now, some of the compelling benefits of specialist QA staffing. We've talked a little bit about what a company is going to be looking for. Now, from the inside out, what are we trying to achieve, and what do we see as the benefits? Well, I'll start in the upper right-hand corner, and bigger isn't always better. There are a number of companies out there on a variety of scales that are capable of doing a lot of things for a lot of different companies. But if you ask them to hone down into a specific skill, they fall into trouble. Why do they fall into trouble? Because they're not specialists. They're not experts. They can do a lot of things okay, jack of all trades. Hard to be masters in all of them as well. Hard to be masters in a few. So bigger isn't always better, and it doesn't always leverage what a company really needs, specifically what managers need to achieve their goals, because that's what we're focused on. We're focused on what managers need to achieve their goals, to achieve business in the manner that they need to. What we have in this organization, it speaks to it a lot on these in this pie chart here, is we're focused on the talent, because we have a lot of we can talk about a lot of different things. We can talk about methodologies. We can talk about vehicles for getting people someplace, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the talent that you can provide to people. So with very directed focus, you're able to know the people in the industry. You're able to know good people. You have good people employed. They know more good people, and it starts at that point, and it builds on best-in-class resources. Because we are focused in this space, we are constantly resourcing the best people available day and night, 24/7, 365 days a year. Our customers may only have somebody a QA need that is needed every once a month, once every 2 months, once a quarter. But for us, it's every day, each and every day. So regardless of whether that customer is looking for an individual, we're looking for them, and we're vetting them and making sure that these are the best available people on the market when they need them. And part of that process is our technical screening process. We have in-house expertise. So since we have in-house expertise, we're able to talk to experts. We're able to talk to these technical resources and truly understand what their capabilities are, where their falling points may be, and what we need to do to get them where they need to be the best possible resources for our customers as possible. Falls right in line with consistent and rapid recruiting engine. Because we've built upon the resources that we have, what we're able to do is we're able to drive a consistent feel and approach for our customers, so that when they are working with us, they understand what they're going to get. It's not going to be hit or miss each and every time. It's always going to be the same experience, and that's very, very important for customers to know, that they can come back to you again and again and again and get the same quality results. And then the final piece is priority. With generalist staffing firms, with generalist IT firms, what you're facing a pecking order. You're facing companies that may value QA, may not value QA, may have expertise in development, may have expertise in other areas. you don't know as a customer where you fall in line necessarily when you provide a job order or a job requirement. With a company like Gallop, QA is what we do. So it's not a surprise that every time your requirement for a QA person or a resource or methodology comes in, you are a number one priority because that's all we live and breathe. So that's what we know. A little bit more about Gallop in a general sense. We're North American focused. We've been a QA staffing company since 2003. We are 100% subsidiary of Signity Technologies, a little bit more of what Matthew had said earlier. Currently, we have 2,000 plus career testers across the globe, and I think we have a slide indicating a little bit more of this in a few minutes. We have, obviously, with that many career testers, we have a quick and flexible access to the right consultants for individual placements, project teams, what have you. And then what we've started, what our goal is, and what we've become to many customers is we are a trusted QA staffing partner and a trusted QA services partner. Excuse me. It's critical, really, if you think about some of the things that Andrew talked about earlier. How are you going to elevate what you do? How are you going to elevate to the next level if you're looking at margins, if you're looking at quality, if you're looking at becoming more to a customer than just another vendor? So some of the differentiators. This can work for quality assurance. It can work for a variety of things, but these are some of the differentiators specifically to us that we feel are impactful. Number one is the niche space. This is what we do. It's where we are. It's how we position ourselves. We're not only involved in the staffing resources, but because we also maintain a thriving managed services practice, we also have expertise in-house that understands how to get the right people at the right place at the right time for companies. Size, being a wholly owned subsidiary of Signity, third largest software testing services company in the world. I think I mentioned that before, but we'll keep mentioning it. We have over 2,000 consultants across the globe, 600 just located in North America, and that number is continuing to grow. If you look at any organization that specializes in one area, 600 resources in just QA is a large talent pool, and that's a great talent pool for us, and we're very proud of it. We have office space spread across the US, UK, India, Australia, and Canada. Gives us that global reach that I was talking about a little bit earlier. It's very, very important. Along the bottom, you also see a few of our logos that we're very proud to call customers and partners. We're very proud of that, and as well we should be. In terms of client satisfaction, another key metric for us, 92% of our clients rate us 4 out of 4, and I'm sure the other 8% are right there as well. And that's quarter after quarter, year after year. This isn't a fluke. This is something we do and we're proud of, and we're proud of moving that bar each and every day. And probably by the next time we have a webinar, it'll be 93%. So I'm thrilled at that. So next slide for me. This is about delivery, and this goes back to what I talked about before about talent. This is you can read through all the bullet points you want to, but the bottom line is what we're talking about certified testers here. We're talking about people that have gone through a training program with us. We're talking about being able to identify the right talent at the right time for our customers, and then bringing them up to speed specifically on our customers' projects, on our customers' needs, making sure that they are perfectly enabled to jump into our customer's environment and hit the ground running. It's a commonly used phrase, but so important to our customers that they're not sitting there with tremendous ramp-up time and worried about constantly having to be with those individuals. We do that by a couple of different things. We set up SLAs, obviously, and make sure that we're adhering to those. It's critical for us to make sure that our customers are happy, and that 4 out of 4 with 92% comes right there. That's part of our process. And then being able to forecast and nurture. This goes directly to the slide that I talked about before. Where can you get me? Where am I going? Where do I need to be best in class? and what can you do to help get me there? Well, this is part of that process, identifying the gaps, identifying where we're headed, identifying technologies, and that's all through a lot of the intellectual property. We'll talk about that in a little bit, that we have in thought leadership. So Section 5, it's one of the reasons why I'm really proud to be here, and I know a lot of people are. It's the management team that's here. Really best in class. They understand this business, decades, and it feels like probably centuries to them, but decades of experience in this space, and they know it inside and out. If you're going to be a specialist in whatever space you choose, whether it's QA, development, what have you, that's what you need. You need that management with that combined with number 6, which is the thought leadership piece. Really critical in where are we headed, what are we doing, and how are we going to get there. Do I have the right things in place? Do I not have the right things in place? Do I have the right teams in place? Do I have the right blend between onshore, offshore? Where am I? What am I doing? These are the people that are going to help you get there. So that's a part of a team that I'm really proud to be part of, and I know that everybody here at Gallop is very proud to be a part of that team as well. So here's some of the skill sets that we talk about. It's funny because when you talk about specialized QA services, you think it's one note. And so it's just one, there should be only one thing on this slide. But the bottom line is, even within QA, it is blossoming into a variety of different disciplines, different technologies, different things that people are going to be doing for you. So these are just a sampling of some of the things that we do for customers currently and that we have the capability to provide customers currently. Right-hand side's purely our domain experience, some of the areas that we have excelled in over the years and continue to excel in. I'm sure that domain experience, as we build new and even better practices, will continue to grow as well, so that we can silo some of our opportunities and make sure that our customers are continually happy with the services that we provide, and that we're continued to be considered thought leaders. So just as a value proposition, I've gone over it. I think this is kind of where we are. We're leaders in software testing. It's what we do. It's what we eat, sleep, and breathe. This is where we are. We're not just filling a position. We're not just ticking a number off your job order chart that you have from an HR perspective or from a manager perspective. We're really identifying gaps and identifying opportunities to improve your business and placing people and placing resources in those spaces. We also offer, because of this, we're able to offer nonlinear growth. And what that means is that because of our intellectual property, because of our R&D, we are able to move past other people who are just placing people, and we're able to accelerate your growth with our understanding of the environment, our understanding of the technology, and our understanding of where things are headed. That was pretty much it for me today. I wanted to thank everybody for being on the call. I know that there may be some questions out there. Hopefully we'll be able to provide some answers for you. Andrew, I also wanted to just say thank you for all of the work that you did to put your slides together. I think there was a wealth of information that we'll be able to look at for days and weeks to come.
Okay, looks like we have a question from Sanath. I see twice Signity as the third largest. What factor that Signity was assessed on for third largest QA company? The analyst firms that are looking at IT services companies as a whole have taken a look at the pure play independent QA organizations that are not providing development services or BPO or help desk or something like that, and based on size and growth and revenues have determined that Signity is actually the third largest and growing about 100% year over year. Questions? Comments?
Greg, I think that's an indication that we covered everything so well that we left nothing to question.
So it's always a good thing to say.
Any questions for Andrew from SIA? Okay. Still have some folks on. Okay. Okay. Well, I want to thank Andrew from SIA and Greg from Gallop for a highly information-packed session today. I hope all of you enjoyed it. To all of our audience, I hope it was informative, and the recording for this webinar will be shared with you in about a day's time. If you have any further questions, feel free to email us directly at marketing@gallup.net. Thank you, everyone.